Summer break is over, kids. Welcome back. Last night in San Antonio, Randy Orton got twisted on Jeff Hardy. AJ Styles and Samoa Joe's big match ended in controversy, and a surprise return that no one asked for threatens to plunge the Universal title further out of relevance. My name is Jeremy Goddamn Masters. Welcome back to the Masterclass. Hell in a Cell 2018. On the pre-show, Rusev Day lost to the New Day in a match to determine which of them was really a day, but both of them turned out to be tag teams and not days, and this perplexed me to the point that I don't have a lesson about it. The main card opened for our first of two Hell in a Cell matches, Randy Orton versus Jeff Hardy, which is weird for a show called Hell in a Cell, since following this match there was about a 3-hour gap between Hells occurring in cells. But if you were thinking this might be a slow build show, you were very much mistaken. Jeff and Randy, as we've seen leading up to this, are willing to absolutely break themselves in order to entertain. And that's exactly what we saw them do. The match opened with some back and forth brawling, but Jeff was pretty quick to start pulling out the old in-ring standards. You have Bob Saget as Mr. Table, Dave Coulier as Kendo Stick Johnson, and John Stamos as Steel Charrington Jr. And everywhere you look, there's blood. Just a lot of blood in this match. If Roman Reigns' forehead waterfall had you wincing, then Randy Orton's skin tag might just give you a heart attack. Midway through the match, we had a moment that essentially defined the evening when Randy grabbed a screwdriver and stuck it in Jeff's ear gauge and just started twisting it around like he was trying to squeeze hipster juice out of it. Jeff recovered from that war crime, and after swantoning a chair on top of Randy, set him up for a leg drop through a table while dangling from the top of the cage. Randy found the strength to roll off the table before Jeff slipped and slammed face first through the empty table, and left a sanguine indentation of what future archaeologists will struggle to identify as his face in the ring. Orton took the opportunity to pin Jeff off of this, ending the match and solidifying our first rather obvious lesson. Look before you leap. Next up, we saw Becky Lynch taking on Charlotte Flair, finally getting her one-on-one match for the SmackDown Women's title, and she proved from the bell that she had no plans to squander this opportunity. The match was straightforward, but that should never be confused for boring. These two told the story in the ring better than anyone else on the card, and that's in part due to their history, but largely thanks to their expertise as wrestlers. Exchanging holds for the first few minutes, the match built into some more aggressive wrestling as they moved along. Both cinched in their patented submissions, and both managed to break out. The finish of the match was an odd one. Charlotte went for a spear, which Becky sort of caught and rolled up, and before anyone was sure what was happening, the ref counted 3 and Becky won. The crowd went wild to Vince's dismay, as the writers would still like you to believe that Becky is somehow the bad guy here. In the post-match, Charlotte offered to raise Becky's hand in victory, but Becky was having none of that, as this moment wasn't about Charlotte, and she wouldn't allow her to co-opt it. Our second lesson is for Charlotte. If you want to stay relevant, don't quit while you're behind. The reason Becky is champion right now is because she kept herself the focus of the title picture. Look where Carmella is right now, tagging with R-Truth. No one deserves that. But her importance in this feud ended the moment that Becky slapped Charlotte like an unruly child south of the Mason-Dixon. You can't advance this by de-escalating when you just lost ground. Up next, we had Tumblr's two favorite ships facing off for the Raw Tag Team titles, Seth and Dean versus Drew and Dolph. Seth spent the early goings of this match getting double-teamed by the Mutts of Mayhem, or whatever the hell they're called. And even when he did tag Dean into the match, the ref was distracted and didn't count it. Holding his own against the pair, Seth eventually managed to get Dean in to do his weird crazy man punching on McIntyre and teased a few dirty deeds. The end of the match saw finisher after finisher no-sold by everyone. Superplexes, super kicks, falcon arrows, zigzags, oh my. But we finally saw the match come to a close when Seth got Dolph on the top rope, cracked off a superplex, rolled through, and stood him up for the falcon arrow. Proving that he's a bad, bad man, Drew snuck back into the ring. As Seth hoisted Ziggler for the finish, he caught a Claymore kick flush on the jaw, killing both him and Dolph, who unfortunately for our heroes landed on top. An unconscious Dolph accidentally pinned Seth in a very B-team move, and the Canines of Conflict stood victorious over the Shield. Lesson 3, students: teamwork makes the dream work, but in a 23-minute spot fest, dog work makes the slog work. That worked, I'm counting it. Following on, we had another match in the unending fetishist DeviantArt /fic that is the AJ and Joe feud for the WWE Championship. Joe got no mic time before or during the match, but he still managed to psych out AJ like no one before him. At one point, Joe even set up for the Muscle Buster, a move that's banned so hard it's a wonder WWE hasn't stolen it out of old NXT tapings. But no muscles would be busted in this match. The finish saw AJ set up for the forearm, but as he leapt from the ropes, he was caught by Daddy's Night-Night Hug, which is what that move is called, don't at me, which he rolled through into a weak pin, retaining the title. But wait! What we initially believed was simply heelish whining from Joe and agreement from Corey Graves turned out to be the tale of the tape, when replays show that prior to the third count, AJ tapped out. This will undoubtedly put a dark mark on his title reign, and before the night was through, a no DQ match was already set for Australia's Super Showdown. Now, this next lesson is very specific. If your victory is assured by the force of gravity acting upon a human hand inches from the ground, maybe save the I give ups for the literal milliseconds to follow. Next up, we had our second match in the Coward versus the Goat Herd feud, when Daniel Bryan and Brie Bella took on Miz and Maurice in a mixed tag match. It was an alright entry in the series, but marred by a few botches near the end. The offense for most of the match was pretty even, although Miz and Maurice did have their classic dip-out moment while getting their lungs perforated by yes kicks. This led to the awkward finish in which a pair of sloppy roll-up pin attempts ended with Maurice on top of Brie for the win. I know we've got a long way to go in this feud, but this wasn't the best way to move it forward. Not that I mind Miz and Maurice going over here, just that it could have been handled a lot better. Our fifth lesson for the evening is don't do that again, I guess. Whatever, they can't all be winners. In the penultimate matchup for the night, Ronda Rousey took on Alexa Bliss in a SummerSlam rematch for the Raw Women's title. And while the result was easy enough to predict, Ronda had a lot to prove here after essentially being gifted the belt, buckling Alexa's elbow like a stepladder in a shitty QVC demonstration merely as a formality. And in this not-so-humble educator's opinion, she proved it. The match was competitive and well-paced and never felt too one-sided, with Ronda selling a rib injury incurred on Raw. While it still ended with Alexa tapping to the armbar, it did so after 12 minutes of solid offense, and it felt like the match that actually earned Ronda her title. Lesson 6, and this one's for real. I know this is a joke of a show with an audience that could be generously described as in the dozens, but if you take one thing away from this channel, let it be this. Never let your ability be an excuse for a lack of effort. Finally, the cell is lowered again for our main event. Roman Reigns versus Braun Strowman for the Universal title. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it, we all know they're better than this. They've put on solid matches in the past, and this was probably their worst. Hell, even the ambulance match was a damn sight closer to a 5-star than this. This was just a slog for the majority of their participation in it, and maybe that was to set up for what came after, but it's really no excuse. They trudged around the cell getting a few big hits in here and there, but nothing like we've seen previously from this pair. Mercifully, following a spear through a table in the corner, Drew and Dolph made their appearance, bullying the ref on the outside to let them in the cage. Dean and Seth appeared in retaliation. They had a nice big fight around and on top of the cell. Drew and Seth fought while hanging from the side of the cell and both went through separate announce desks. Then, whose music should hit but the gorilla of Manifest Destiny himself, Brock Fluffy Ears Lesnar. Brock made like rise against and kicked in the door. But instead of yelling his demands, he simply picked up the table shards and Bork smashed the shit out of Roman and Braun, while Heyman maced Mick Foley for reasons that we may never quite determine. Thus, a substitute ref had to come in to call the match off, and end Hell in a Cell on a somewhat sour note. Final lesson, when you put down a beast, make sure you finish the job. Now, a couple of sloppy finishes shouldn't detract from just how good this show was. Probably the best that the main roster has put on this year. I think there's some promising seeds for a solid few weeks of shows leading up to the Super Showdown, all of which I will be covering. And while I can't promise that I won't be taking any more hiatuses, I can promise it'll be far more active from here on out. Make sure to leave some classroom feedback on your thoughts on Hell in a Cell in the comments down below, like this video and subscribe for more content from me, Jeremy Goddamn Masters. This has been the Masterclass. You're welcome.